What's going on, guys? Zombie Wars here, and welcome back again to another video. Today we will be discussing the Five Nights at Freddy's PTB and Springtrap in Dead by Daylight. Before we get into this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'd love to see some new faces on the channel, and I cover DVD news, speculation, and more. Today I wanted to make a video showcasing the many references and Easter eggs on both the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria map, as well as the new killer Springtrap, the animatronic, as well as his many add-ons. So first, let's go over the map, which contains many Easter eggs and references to the Fnaf series. Now, there are many Easter eggs on this map, so I don't know if I can get to every single one, as some of them are relatively small, such as the phone ringing at the front of the building, which of course would be a reference to Phone Guy. So I'm going to be focusing here on the larger and more relevant references and Easter eggs, because if I went over every single little Easter egg and reference, this video would be like a movie. So starting off with the most apparent Easter eggs, let's start with the ball pit that's featured in the arcade room. When entering the arcade room, you'll notice that there's a ball pit with a dead end sign, and if you look even closer, you'll see some arms and legs sticking out from some unfortunate victims that are seemingly deceased inside of the ball pit. There's also trails of blood that stretch all in front of the pit as well. This is definitely a reference to Into the Pit, which is a Five Nights at Freddy's story from the book series Fazbear Frights that features a time-traveling ball pit with a more monstrous form of the yellow rabbit that terrorizes a child named Oswald. The limbs sticking out of the ball pit even match up with some scrapped key art from the video game as well. Now, what I'm curious about is if this is going to stay as just like a map reference, or perhaps it's going to be a teaser to a legendary skin for the Into the Pit rabbit. Though it does seem a bit unlikely, as that would mean we'd have 3 different iterations of the yellow rabbit as a killer, alongside Springtrap, Movie Afton, and Glitchtrap. Either way, the ball pit is a really neat reference to the Into the Pit story, and the deceased bodies make it even scarier. The second Easter egg on the map is one that I haven't seen many people actually point out, however. So the roof of the map is actually seemingly a random hole, but it's actually in the shape of a rabbit. I also understand it's probably just meant to look like a generic Bonnie face. It's not meant to be a particular iteration, but for some reason, to me, it reminds me of Glitchtrap. I think that's because of how round the face is. Either way, this is really neat, and for those who are new to Dead by Daylight with this chapter, each of the maps take place in a realm created by a creature known as the Entity, and they're often based on the memories of both survivors and killers. So this rabbit is seemingly William being so full of himself that he's quite literally burned an image of himself onto the map for all the killers and survivors to see. Or perhaps it's some gift given from the Entity that's engraved on top of the building he's once owned, and of course carried out his crimes. Either way though, this is such a small but really cool detail that I'm really glad that Behavior put into the map, because I just think it's really neat. I only noticed it once I loaded in as a survivor, and I just stared up and I'm like, wait a second, that looks like a bunny. That's not a random hole in the roof. So this one is a little more interesting in my opinion, and this one falls under speculation a bit, but it's still neat to point out. And that's on the map. It seems that all the Fnaf animatronics are featured in the new Five Nights at Freddy's map as animatronics that even perform, except for a single character, Foxy the Pirate. If you head to Pirate's Cove, you'll notice that he's missing, and instead remains a bunch of covered boxes with a little Foxy plush on top. Now, it's possible that Foxy has been pushed into the boxes for being out of order, so basically he's been decommissioned. However, I would like to think that this might be a hint towards a fan skin idea that a lot of people have and been begging for, which is a Foxy Blight. Now, I know what you're thinking. The main 4 cannot be DBD killers. We already know this, that Scott set a boundary that the main characters, the missing children, cannot be killers. And you'd be right. However, you know who does have a connection to the Foxy plush that isn't the regular Foxy animatronic? Nightmare Foxy. In Five Nights at Freddy's 4, you ward off Foxy and he turns into a, well, plushie. So what if Foxy's exclusion leads to a bigger skin drop later on down the road, and we get some Nightmare animatronics for just specifically Nightmare Foxy? Of course, that is extremely speculative. However, the lack of Foxy the Pirate is very noticeable, and it does come off as a bit odd to me considering Foxy is a fan favorite. It definitely feels intentional, especially with putting the Foxy plush on top of the boxes, so they definitely knew that they're hiding Foxy. I just figured I'd point this out nonetheless, as I thought this was a really interesting, I guess, lack of a feature on the map. And of course, we can't talk about the Five Nights at Freddy's map without the map jump scares. There are a few of them. There's 2 jump scares in this map to my knowledge, and that's one of them being from an endoskeleton that appears from what I believe is like an employee's maintenance room from the vents above. When you walk by, it's really creepy, like the lights go out and he almost like falls on you from the vents. I'm not sure what this guy is doing up there, but I think he's really neat. I actually thought he was the mimic when I first went through the room, but he's just a regular endoskeleton. Additionally, another jump scare that was found actually reveals the location of Chica's missing cupcake. While entering a locker, you can actually get jump scared by Mr. Cupcake, which is pretty neat. It's very notable that Chica's cupcake was missing, so it was only a matter of time before we found out where he was hiding. Moving on from the map, let's talk about the man himself. He has plenty of references and little Easter eggs referring to the previous games. So much, in fact, I don't even think I would be able to cover every single one, as there are just so many between his voice lines, his add-ons, and even just his animations. So let me share, in my opinion, the coolest ones. So the most obvious ones are his load-in animations, which are definitely references to his animations in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, even down to his idle animation. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory, they're just animations based on previous installments of him. But what I think is even cooler are his voice lines. Some of William's voice lines are actually references to the previous installments, one of which is him seemingly directly mocking Henry Emily, that being his speech at the end of Pizzeria Simulator.
Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, friend.
The darkest pit of hell is open for business.
This is a reference to me that is extremely neat and is one of Springtrap's hardest lines in my opinion, though it is a bit odd as this version of Springtrap that we get in Dead by Daylight was taken before even the events of Fnaf 3. So this William would have never had the ending that was in Five Nights at Freddy's Pizzeria Simulator happen to him. Aside from this, most of his voice lines seem to be callbacks to the previous installments such as Pizzeria Sim, Five Nights at Freddy's AR, Ultimate Custom Night, along with some original voice lines, of course.
I'm the fun one.
His add-ons also contain a lot of references, of course, as add-ons are items that are important to the killer's memory, so seemingly they would all be references. So I'll be covering arguably the coolest ones that are featured in his kit, as pretty much every single add-on is a reference. So the Iridescent Remnant is actually one of Springtrap's visceral add-ons, allowing him to block pallets and windows when going through a security door. This add-on is a reference, of course, to, well, Remnant, which is really important to the FNAF lore, as Remnant is essentially what causes the animatronics to become possessed in the first place. It's also the only time I can recall Remnant being physically represented, aside from Five Nights at Freddy's AR. Otherwise, I believe it's just mentioned by name in lore. Freddy's hat is another cool add-on, one that makes Springtrap's axe weight increase by 100%, and while the item itself is pretty self-explanatory, I mean it's Freddy Fazbear's hat, what is really neat is the name drop of Gabriel in the description that reads, "Gabriel trusted the wrong grown-up. Now he's the star of the show," which seemingly confirms that the missing child Gabriel is the kid possessing Freddy Fazbear. Now this one is actually one of my favorite references, even though it's not that important, and that's there's actually a drawing of Purple Guy with the Purple Guy drawing add-on, which reveals survivors' auras when they perform rushed interactions while embedded with an axe. Now, this one is neat because, of course, while it is a reference to the Purple Guy, what makes this even cooler is that it's actually a FNAF World reference as well. The description reads, "He only takes 10 seconds to draw," which is one of the loading screens in FNAF World as well. So technically speaking, this would make this the only connection between FNAF World and Dead by Daylight, unless we get some charms or something when the chapter officially comes out. Personally, I'm hoping for a rainbow charm. FNAF World is actually a guilty pleasure of mine, so it's really cool to see that there is at least some sort of FNAF World reference, even if it's very, very small. But that's pretty much it, guys. I just wanted to cover most of the references and Easter eggs on the FNAF map. There are still so many more in this chapter. It's actually a giant love letter to the Five Nights at Freddy's community. But these were, I think, some of the more, I guess, standout Easter eggs and references that are in the game. Of course, there's things such as the perks, all the voice lines, and even the bio. But let me know what you guys think. Are you guys enjoying the PTB? Do you guys enjoy Springtrap and Dead by Daylight? I personally am obsessed with this chapter. I think Behavior did a phenomenal job, and like I said earlier, I think it's an amazing love letter to the Five Nights at Freddy's community and FNAF fans of Dead by Daylight. But that's pretty much it, guys. That's going to end off today's video here. I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great day. Subscribe, like, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.